Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Xan. I am Shoob, and today we are here to do Big Ten win totals, Part 3. It is time to wrap up the Big Ten, and today we got a batch of teams, the newbies, the 4 Pac-12 schools that are joining this year, and then Maryland and Rutgers, because they're sort of newbies, even though they've been in the Big Ten for about a decade now. But you're all the newbies and you're all the miscellaneous, so you get thrown into this little bucket here in this video. But yeah, man, this is an interesting group of teams. I think this is a fun one for me personally. I had a lot of fun looking at these teams and deciding which way to go here, because there's an element here of, well, these teams are joining a new league, so this is uncharted territory for a lot of these schools. So it's gonna be different. And if you're schools like Maryland and Rutgers, you have the Big Ten East death row march. That's finally not an obstacle anymore. You don't have to worry about not ever winning anything because Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan are blocking your path every year. So that's some good news for those two. But how you doing, man?
I've been doing good, man. Been doing good. I'm excited to finish up the Big Ten and move on and get through the win totals, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to play out this year, given all this new conference realignment and everything. Because quite honestly, I don't think we've ever seen this much realignment happen in one off season. So it's
No.
going to be quite interesting to see how it all plays out in the field. So I'm interested to jump on into this and see what you have to say as well.
Absolutely. Yep. This video is ground zero for conference realignment in 2024 right here. So this is where it's at. All right, let's get going. The Maryland Terrapins, going in alphabetical order here, starting up top, the Terps. Mike Locksley coming into his 6th season at Maryland. They went 8-5 last year. The Talia Tagovailoa era is finally over at Maryland. It felt like Talia was there for a long time. He actually broke the Big Ten all-time passing record very quietly. That kind of went under the radar, but yeah,
That is very quietly.
Tagovailoa.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and it's a big loss for them, but like Loxley's back for his 6th season. Again, they've had a track record of being an above 500 team. They've been competitive with some of the big boys in the Big Ten, but they haven't been able to get over that hurdle because, as I mentioned at the top, they were in the Big Ten East. They had some big boys at the top blocking their path to any sort of championship, but now that's not necessarily the case. So the schedule, I think, gets on the whole a little bit easier. Their win total is sitting at 6.5 wins. Heavy juice the under at -150. So where do you want to start, man? Start with the offense. Not a whole lot of guys returning. It's going to look a whole lot different this year.
You know, some of the teams that we're going to be covering in this particular section kind of have that same theme. Not a whole lot of guys returning. So what exactly we're going to be looking at? Maryland is no exception. I mean, MJ Morris is the projected starter coming in from NC State. I know you're a big MJ Morris guy. You like him a lot. Or at least you
I think
like
I
the
need to
depth that
tone
he
that.
he
I
would
think I
have
need to tone
provided.
it down a little bit. I think I need
Okay,
to tone it
okay.
down. We don't want him to
You're
be the
Mitch
next wave.
Griffiths.
Yeah, we don't want to be the
Your
next
next
Mitch
Mitch
Griffiths.
Griffiths.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, like he is better than Mitch Griffiths. Like I will grant you that. But MJ Morris is certainly a downgrade from to his little brother. But I mean, we'll see, man. I certainly think he still is a capable player, and we'll see how he develops in this Maryland offense. But overall, I'm expecting this Maryland offense to take a step back purely because of the quarterback position. Now, they do return Roman Hemby. That is a big return for them, although he didn't perform as well last year as he did in the year prior to that. But he's still running at 4.8 yards a clip, so it's still somewhat efficient there. So you've got that. That's a plus. You've also got Caden Prather returning 650 yards, and then you've got Taj Felton returning another 700. So you've got returning production from the wide receiver spot, 2 key guys there. So that's also really nice. One thing that really sticks out to me, Shub, is this offensive line losing Delmar Glaze, because they have 4 projected starters to be guys who are just basically transfer portal guys. And that can mean so many things, because transfer portal guys can sometimes be gems. They can outperform like their weight class and so on and so forth, and vice versa. So it's really interesting, but I'm expecting this offensive line to be at least an average unit, if not a little bit worse than last year, because you can't just lose an NFL tackle who goes in the 3rd round and expect not to go backwards when you're not really supplementing with anyone elite, unless one of these transfers just really pop off, which is a possibility. That's why I'm going to give them at least an average kind of grade on their offensive line. So we'll see. But I'm thinking a slight step back and definitely an overall step back on offense this year. Although I do still think this team will be able to put the ball in the end zone a little bit. We look at the defensive side of the ball, Shub. I look at the defensive line here. I mean, you return Jordan Phillips in the interior, you return an edge rusher and Donnell Brown, who's pretty solid. You've got a pretty decent D line there. You've got some dudes who are formidable on that line of scrimmage. I don't know how well they stack in terms of depth in the rotation, though, so that's a concern for me. I look at the next level backing up those big men, and I see the linebackers, and none of those dudes grade out all that great. So it's not a lot of it's a little less than to be desired at that spot. Then we go back to the secondary, and I do like some of their ads in the secondary. I really like the Jalen Husky ad from Bowling Green. I think that's a quiet but good ad. A lot of people will be like, "What? A three-star transfer from Bowling Green?" Well, I mean, we look at the we look at the stats here. We look at the people who grade these guys, and he actually grades out really well. So that's definitely something that we look out for. I think Husky is a good ad for them. But we can't ignore that they lost Tar Heaps still to the NFL. So it's basically trading, hopefully, what they're hoping is a one for one trade. But again, it's hard to replace NFL production. So it makes me think that this secondary, it could still be like an average secondary, but it could take a slight step back. Just depends. They also do return a safety in Dante Schrader, who I like. But otherwise, overall, I'm looking at this group and I'm thinking it's not going to be a bad team, Shub, but I think it's going to be a team that's just slightly not as good as it was on both sides of the ball, ever so slightly. Um, but with that being said, a lot of that comes down to your schedule, though, your scheduling dynamics, how you're going to perform this year. And I think one thing that's really interesting is, I mean, I know Josh Gaddis came in and we were talking about him last year and being like the failed experiment and after winning the Broyles and all that. And then, he came in and produced a top 30 offense. Now, is that a Tua effect or is that a Gaddis effect? We'll find out this year what he's able to
Probably
do with MJ
probably
Morris.
a baby two effect,
Baby Tua effect, yeah.
I think.
But I think so too, and that's why I do think that offense can take a step back. But we'll see, man. We'll see. Let's look at the schedule. UConn's pretty bad. They should be able to beat UConn. You get Michigan State at home. We'll see about that. Michigan State's going to be better than they were last year. You go at Virginia. That should be a winnable game, but it is at Virginia. Then you get Villanova. You should beat Villanova. You go at Indiana, which is a little bit tricky because we're a little higher in Indiana this year. They've got a better team. They got a good coaching staff there. Then you get the bye week to prepare for Northwestern. I think that's really advantageous for you because Northwestern is one of those games that you got to have if you're trying to hit this win total. Right now, I lean win for them just because they come off the bye week. They're at home. You get Northwestern. I think that's a win. So we got at least 3 wins. I'm just going to give to them. USC is probably a loss. At Minnesota is kind of dicey because it's at Minnesota. And I know, Shub, you mentioned this a lot, and I'm kind of taking a page from your book here. A lot of these games, a lot of their lower schedule or lower tier teams on their schedule are away games. That does not really bode well for a win total when you're trying to steal some wins for your win total. And I can already tip my hat to where I'm going with this, Shub, but I'm going with this with a good amount of confidence. We'll just finish the schedule for we'll just finish the schedule here just for the sake of being thorough. But then the back end of their schedule is kind of rough, Shoot. They go at Oregon off the bye week. Then they get Rutgers. Okay, that's not too rough. But then you get Iowa, and then you go at Penn State. Yeah, I'm really struggling to see 7 wins here. This line is 6.5, Shoot. I mean, look, UConn, okay, Villanova, Northwestern, and now your other ones are maybe Rutgers, Minnesota, Indiana, Virginia, Michigan State. So if you win all those, you're over. If you win all of them, I don't think they're going to win all of them, Shub, and I don't think they're going to win those games that they're not going to be favored in, like Penn State, Iowa, USC. So, I mean, this is a hard play to the under for me, Shub. I know it's juiced to the under, and I think that's with good reason. I'm going to go under on the Maryland Terrapins, and I'm going to ride this with 3 points of confidence.
Wow, 3 confidence points. So high confidence for Xan on that under 6.5 for the Terps. Xan fading the Turtles, man. Well, I am going to also fade the Terps, but I'm going to do it with low confidence. I do see reasons for optimism with this team. I think the defense is still going to be very good. I think their defensive coordinator he's a pretty good defensive coordinator. I remember doing these win totals a couple of years ago when we first started this, and I remember Maryland was coming off of that 2021 season where they had one of the worst defenses in the Big Ten, and he came in and quickly turned into a top 40 defense, uh another top 40 defense last year. And I see reasons for optimism here. I think that they can jump into the top 25, top 30 defensively. And I think primarily that's because of the defensive line and the secondary. I think those two units, especially, are what's going to be the better units on these teams. The offensive line is probably going to take a pretty big step back. Like I think we're underestimating when you go in the portal and just completely portal your entire offensive line in, that probably means it's not going to be very good because that means that they're desperate for anybody that could start. But I'm really intrigued by this quarterback battle, man, between MJ Morris and Billy Edwards Jr. Of course, I did have the hots for MJ Morris last year with NC State. After doing some further research, I think I need to water that down a little bit. I don't want to get caught in Mitch Griffith situation 2.0, as you pointed out earlier. But I still do like MJ Morris's long-term upside as a potential quarterback for Locksley at Maryland over the long run for the next couple of years or so. But anyways, MJ Morris, true sophomore, graded below average last year according to PFF and over 100 attempts, so not like it was a bad sample size. But then Billy Edwards Jr., great runner. Guy can run, but only a 33% completion rate on 30 passes last year. So he's throwing more incompletions than completions. And I know not a whole lot of sample size there, but I think it's a pretty big question mark. Personally, I think you got to go with MJ Morris. As long as he stays at Maryland, he has the upside to be the guy for the next couple, maybe 3 years at Maryland. But
MJ Griffiths.
MJ Griffiths. Looking at the schedule, my model surprisingly has Maryland at 6.8 wins, which is a little bit lean to the over. But as I said earlier, I'm going to still lean to the under. I am going to go against my model here. I think it's the scheduling, kind of same reasons as you. I look at the schedule, I find 7 wins pretty hard to get. And I know you look at the first part of the schedule and you're like, okay, UConn, Virginia, Villanova, Indiana, Northwestern. Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'm a lot higher in Virginia this year than everybody else is. And you got to go at Virginia. That is a trap game. That's a game if Maryland does not have their act together, that they could lose that game.
Same
Michigan
goes for
State.
Michigan State and Indiana.
You can say the same thing about Michigan State and Indiana, especially Indiana. I
And
think
then
I'd
Northwestern's
actually
also a wild card. Like even though you got a bye week, they're always a wild card.
absolutely. I would still like Maryland to win those games or most of those games, but Indiana, I consider that more of a toss-up, if anything. If it's at Indiana, probably lean Indiana. Michigan State, I think Michigan State at home earlier in the year is actually a good thing though, because I think if you get Michigan State early, I mean that's a completely different team. I feel like they might be a team that maybe gets better, that you maybe don't want to play them as the season goes on. You know, there's teams every year that they start out horrible and we're like, oh, this team sucks, but then they end up actually looking pretty okay at the end of the year. I feel like that could be Michigan State, for instance. But you got Villanova and UConn in the bank, sure, but I'll give you another 3, 4, maybe 5 wins that I'm like, okay, like you should probably beat some of these teams. Rutgers there towards the end of the schedule. Rutgers is still going to have a very tough defense. But other than that, okay, maybe you steal one and you beat USC. Maybe you beat Iowa at home. I feel like we're pulling the strings here. I'm gonna say 6 wins is more likely than 7. I'm with you. I'm going to go on the under, but with low confidence because I do think that this team can get to a bowl game. I think the defense is still going to be pretty solid, and I do think there is upside with MJ Morris if he takes a step forward, but I'm not going to bank on that. I'm not going to make that mistake. So I'm going to say under with low confidence and going under with high confidence. Okay. Moving on here. The next team on the docket, the Oregon Ducks. Oregon coming in with a hefty win total line of 10.5 wins. Slight juice the under there at -130, even money on the over. Oregon, oof, they are coming off a season last year where they were a pretty darn good team. They just couldn't beat Washington. They beat everybody else on their schedule, and they beat the crap out of everybody else on their schedule except Washington. Kalen DeBoer had their number, but luckily for Oregon, Kalen DeBoer is no longer in your way, and that Washington team is definitely not going to be nearly as good. And of these batch of teams, Oregon clearly is the best, and they're a team that has a good amount of guys returning. They've done well in the transfer portal. Dan Lanning in recruiting and NIL, thanks to Phil Knight, who apparently is giving them an unlimited NIL fund, which is like actually really crazy considering that. I mean, Phil Knight's, what is he, 86 years old, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And he's like, I want a national championship before I die. And he's like, unlimited NIL for
Yep.
Dan Lanning. I mean, that's honestly,
It's
that's
showing. It's showing.
it is showing. And like they are, I remember like 6, 7 years ago when Kirby Smart first got hired at Georgia, and Georgia was in the dumps. I mean, Florida, we weren't doing too great either. That was when I was at undergrad at Florida. I remember looking at recruiting and seeing all the things that Georgia was doing. And I'm like, guys, like Georgia's like getting all these 5 stars and they look like they're building a monster. And, of course, in
They
Gainesville, it's like,
absolutely
oh,
were.
yeah, okay, sure, sure. We're still better than them. Oh, well, what happened? Well, Oregon's ahead of schedule, in my opinion, and they're doing all the right things. They're building a Georgia on the West Coast, in my opinion, and
They
you
are.
share the
They
same.
are.
But anyways, for 2024, they are the third highest team in terms of odds to win the national championship, second highest to win the Big Ten, and they are definitely a team that is capable of that. What's your outlook on this team with a win total of 10.5 for the regular season?
Well, obviously, I mean, as you just highlighted and how I kind of reiterated, we're both high on this team, Shoob. I mean, their line is sitting there at 10.5, and I fully expect them to be in competition to exceed that. So this is going to be. Let me just do this. Let me go through what they have. Let's not even focus on what they lost because this is still a really talented team from top to bottom. Bro, they bring in Dylan Gabriel, and then they have Dante Moore backing him up. And I say what you want about Dylan Gabriel, but he has been good every single year that he has been playing college ball, and he is very, very experienced. I love that pickup there. If anything, I think he can replicate what Bo Nix did for them. So I think they're in great shape. They lose Bucky Irving to the NFL, but they still return Jordan James, who, as a backup, was 750-yard rusher with 11 touchdowns on 7 yards per carry. Shoe, come on now, you still got a lot of talent at that position. Then you bring in Evan Stewart. You've got Trayshawn Holden coming back, and then you've got Tez Johnson coming back, your 1,200-yard wide receiver. You still got a lot of pieces right there on the offense. Sure, you lose Jackson Power Johnson to the NFL on your offensive line, but they still return some people on that offensive line, and they still have other people on there who are pretty solid. This offense is going to be really good. That's no doubt, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think it's going to be Ohio State and Oregon in terms of offense in this league, and it's going to be them versus the field in terms of offensive efficiency. Then we go over and we look at the defense, man. This D line is deep. This Oregon D line is so deep from top to bottom. They have rotation guys for days that all grade out very well and are all highly rated and very athletic. They are so good. Then you look at the linebacking group. They've got Jeff Bossa sitting there, who's still like a solid grade. Doesn't not an elite guy, but still a very good like player in his own right that a lot of guys would like to have. And then you look back at the defensive backs, man, and they added Jabbar Muhammad, a guy who I thought could be like a first round pick last year. And he's going to be sitting there as an Oregon Duck now. And then they add Cam Alexander from UTSA, who also grades out really well. So, I mean, when we were talking about Ohio State, Shoe, where are the weaknesses? I think Dan Lanning is a great coach. He's a great defensive coach. And now you have all these offensive weapons as well. I mean, Shoob, this team is a national championship contender this year. They absolutely are. I would be shocked if we do not see this team in the playoffs this year. I think that I know Ohio State and Michigan are both on their schedule. They're not going to lose to both of them, Shoob. They're going to beat at least one of those teams, and because of that, Shoob, and schedule be damned. I'm looking at the schedule. There's no need to go over it, Shoob. I'm going to go over on the Oregon Ducks. I like them to go 11-1. I think they will lose somewhere. I am going to go over on the Ducks with one confidence point and the one confidence point is only because they play both Ohio State and Michigan. And if Dylan Gabriel goes down, your offense becomes much more complicated with Dante Moore. We saw Dante Moore, yes, he was a 5-star out of high school, but he did have his struggles at UCLA. I do like that there is a decent backup option there, but at the same time, Dylan Gabriel, as long as he is healthy, I like this over.
I like it. I'm also very high on this team. I think if you could nitpick anything, I think if there's anything out there to nitpick, it may be the secondary. but I feel like that's you're grasping at straws there. I still think the secondary will
I
be
mean, they've got
very
Jabbar
solid.
Muhammad and Cam Alexander coming in, man. It's gonna be a good
Yeah.
secondary.
Yeah. Oh, they still got great players in there for sure. Like I said, it's nitpicking. Jabbar Muhammad projected late first round pick. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I didn't even think he was going to be. I didn't even think he would be projected to be that high in the draft
I
already.
can't believe he didn't. I didn't. I can't believe he didn't declare last year.
Yeah. I Phil Knight, unlimited NIL probably talks. It probably talks pretty well, especially since they got him a transfer from their arch rival from Washington. Anyways, I think what's fascinating here is I went to look at this team and I was like, all right, quarterback situation with Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel, I feel like is very fascinating to me because he's a great college quarterback. Yeah, he's not going to be an elite NFL guy. He's probably going to be a career backup in the NFL because he doesn't have the arm strength, but the guy is dang accurate and the guy throws the deep ball very well. And I was looking at Bo Nix last year, and Bo Nix was just like an efficiency god last year. Bo Nix was an efficiency god for sure. But Bo Nix also was a little bit of a check down merchant. Bo Nix A dot average depth of target last year was 6.8 yards downfield, which is still not bad, but that's not super deep. Dylan Gabriel A dot last year 10.2. His average depth of target was over 10 yards downfield. And both were very good at throwing intermediate deep balls. So even though Bo Nix's A dot was a lot shorter, he threw more screens. When Bo Nix did throw the ball downfield, he was pretty good. Thing is, Dylan Gabriel throws the ball downfield a lot more at a higher rate. And with Oregon's offense, yeah, he won't necessarily have to do that as much, but he can do it very well. And that's the thing. Dylan Gabriel does what Dan Lanning and this offense will want him to do very well. And I think that's why there's not going to be much drop off here with Dylan Gabriel at all from Bo Nix. I think it'll be pretty much the same. And you mentioned Dante Moore. I think it's interesting, man. It's weird because Dante Moore was thrown into the fire as a true freshman last year at UCLA. Didn't do so well. Maybe, maybe this is something that can revitalize his career. I wouldn't say revitalize because after 1 year, you can't just say he's a bust, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe this is something that he can gain some more confidence, sit behind Dylan Gabriel. Maybe there's more that we can see from him. Maybe there's some progression back there, and maybe it's something where if Dylan Gabriel was to get hurt, you have Dante Moore back there that maybe he can turn the switch turns on, and this really doesn't go downhill if Gabriel ever were to get hurt. And I think skill positions and offensive line they'll probably be better than what Bo Nix had last year. I think Dylan Gabriel will have better weapons than what Bo Nix had last year, which is just crazy. And as I mentioned before, defensive line going to be very good. Linebackers really good. Secondary pretty solid as well. Looking at the schedule, my model has 10.9 wins. I don't have them as an underdog in any game on this schedule. I do not have them as an underdog in any game on this schedule. The
Including
model
Ohio State.
Yes, remember I said this when we did this on the Ohio State video on that vid. My model has them as 50-50. I personally would give the edge to Ohio State, even though it's at Autzen. So I'd say I'd still give Ohio State the slight edge there. But other than that, they're a big favorite in pretty much every game. And the only games that I could see potentially slipping up are Michigan, and that's it. I don't think they'll be anywhere near Washington. They'll be a lot better than Washington, Wisconsin, Maryland, Purdue, Michigan State,
There's no one
UCLA.
else on the
There's
schedule that
nobody.
touches
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
there's nobody that else that touches them.
They've
And
got two games that they're at risk for. If Dylan Gabriel goes down and Dante Moore struggles, then maybe a few more games they're at risk for. But ultimately, really just the two that concern me. And I think they'll win at least one of them. That's why I'm going on this over.
I'm gonna join you on this over. I'm gonna say that Oregon finishes the season 11-1, and I'm gonna do it with medium confidence.
I
Not
like it.
super high confidence, but I'm gonna go with medium confidence because just of the small risk that Dylan Gabriel were to get hurt, Dante Moore doesn't pan out. Maybe the secondary isn't quite as good as we think. I'm really picking the straws here, like I said, grasping the straws, what I should say. But yeah, we're high on the Ducks here. All right, moving
Quack
on.
quack.
Quack quack. Now we're gonna be swinging our swords with the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers. How about Rutgers last year? A very surprising team. Not to me. I just want to take a victory lap. I was high on Rutgers. Remember, that was one of my big win total plays last year. I saw the spark coming from Rutgers. Greg Schiano, fifth year at Rutgers, or fifth year back at Rutgers, 16th overall as the head coach. They went 7-6 last year, a big progression when they were a team that was used to averaging 2 to 3 wins per year and being the cellar dweller in the Big Ten. They have risen out of that cellar and they're now middle of the pack and went to a bowl game last year. So Greg Schiano's got this thing in the right direction, and I think I was not surprised to see this happen. And now Rutgers goes in this year with some pretty lofty expectations. A lot of people are pegging them as actually a dark horse team in this league. Not a dark horse to win the Big Ten, but a dark horse to maybe win like 8 or 9 games, which I don't know about that. But we'll get into it. What do you think, Xan? 6.5 is the line, and it's even money on both sides.
I like that this is even money. It makes it more fun that way. So, I mean, like you said, hey, I do want to mention that before picking the under on Rutgers last year, I did say beforehand, guys, I can't believe it. Like, I really was about to go over on Rutgers. Can you believe that? And then I went and proceeded to take the under. But, anyways, we'll move forward on this one. Hey, I will say this. Rutgers was putting together some pretty dang good defenses, really under the table, especially defensive lines. But overall, last year, their defense wasn't as good as it was the year before. We're seeing 43rd in defensive efficiency. So it's something that's definitely going to have to improve if they want to take that next step. Now, their new quarterback is Ethan Kaliakmanis. Where's that name ring a bell? Minnesota transfer, the Greek BB gun, the Greek water gun, whatever you want to call him. But at the same time, I feel like he might be better than what they've had there in years past. So it could
Exactly.
potentially actually be an upgrade. Like
Somehow.
honestly,
Somehow.
somehow, exactly. Like Rutgers has not had good QB play by any stretch of the imagination at all. So Kaliakmanis, I think, can very least be like an average quarterback, and that's all you really need to play at a higher level at Rutgers because they have not even had average quarterback play here lately. So then, what I really like is they returned Kyle Monagai. Kyle Monagai is really good. I mean, that's 1,250 yards of returning production, 8 touchdowns on over 5 yards a carry. That's a good running back right there. Then you return Nassim Brantley, 900 yards of returning production with 9 touchdowns. You return Christian Demmel, 460 yards, 3 touchdowns. These are both seniors. And then the transfer that they got, Dimary Miller, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. Granted, he's from Monmouth, but at the same time, I like this little wide receiver group they got for Kaliakmanis to throw to. And so they've got like a little dual threat quarterback with Kaliakmanis. Maybe they like to do some RPO with Monagai in there. This offense could actually be a pretty decent looking group here, Shoob. Like they actually might surprise some people. They also returned their best offensive lineman in Holland Pierce. That's what I really like. And then the rest of their offensive line, they graded out a little bit below average, but I'm hoping to see that a slight improvement in this offensive line in general. I'm not expecting it to be an elite group, but I do expect it to be at least a serviceable group. And then we look over and we see the defensive line. The defensive line returns Aaron Lewis, good defensive edge rusher. The rest of the line doesn't really grade out as well as it has in years past. I know you and I have looked in the past and been like, wow, this Rutgers line grades out really well. Like, wow, they've got a good line. This year, I don't think it's as much the case. I know you mentioned before we even started the Rutgers segment that you really like their D line. I don't think their D line's as deep as it has been in years past. I'm not as high on them. But then we look off on the second level, and they do return Mohamed Toure, who grades out pretty well as well. So I do like that. I think they're going to have a pretty formidable rush defense, as they have in years past. But the thing that I really like about this defense, Shoob, is their secondary. And I know they lost Max Melton to the NFL, but I look and I see you return Flip Dixon, who grades out pretty well. You return Shaquan Loyal, who grades out pretty well. Both starting safeties last year, both returning. You return Desmond Igbiga's son. However, like I think I probably botched that, but he grades out pretty well too as a nickelback. And then you bring in, and I like this, Robert Alongerbeam. He's returning, but I mean, what a name. Yeah, all, puns aside there. That dude's probably got some NIL deals, in the future. Maybe that might
Probably.
get him kicked off the team. But anyway. And then and Eric Rogers as well. Now those guys didn't grade out elite, but they graded out very average and serviceable. So now we've got all these returning guys with meaning that play meaningful snaps. I think the secondary can be pretty dang solid, Shoob. And then if And if this offense takes a step forward with some creative play calling, there's definitely enough talent on this offense to do some work. So I actually think Rutgers actually has a pretty decent team this year. Um, and I wouldn't be shocked if they go bowling, man. I mean, I know they're sitting there at 6.5, so obviously Vegas says even an under is bowling. But I think they have the potential to really, like, potentially pop off if things go right with this offense. I mean, you look at their schedule, man. They start with Howard and Akron. That's 2 wins in the bank. You're gonna go 2-0 to start the year. You go your bye week, and then you go at Virginia Tech for some inner Sandman action. We'll see. We're both higher on Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech's got the edge in that game, despite Rutgers coming off a bye week. But then you've got Washington. I think that's a winnable game against Washington. You're at home. Washington's got to go 2,000 miles to come play you. And Washington's a shell of what they used to be. Granted, Jed Fish still is a great coach, so we'll see. I'll give toss-up mode to that one, but that's not going to be an easy one for Washington. It will be no cakewalk. Then you go at Nebraska. Nebraska is a little bit of an anomaly this year. We don't know fully what to expect from them, but we do expect that they're going to be a little bit better under Coach Matt Rule. Year two rule, we know how that works. The rule, the year two rule for rule, like legitimately. But anyway, then you get Wisconsin. A little, not as high on them as we have been in years past. And you've got UCLA. UCLA, and I believe I'm missing one in here, Shu. UCLA, and then
USC.
USC, that's what it is. USC and then UCLA. USC is, I think, is going to be an improved team this year, at least on the defensive side of the ball, but we'll get to that. And then UCLA, man, they just look bad, man. Like they've got some talent there, but I really don't like what I'm seeing with the UCLA Bruins. I think they can beat. I think they can win that game. Then you get a bye week. You go Minnesota. I think that's winnable. Or not at Minnesota. You play at home versus Minnesota. I think that's winnable. Then you go at Maryland. I think that's winnable. You play Illinois. I think that's winnable. You play Michigan State at Michigan State. I think that's winnable too, especially a late season. I mean, I gotta say, like when I'm going through this schedule, Shoob, I see a lot of potentially winnable games for Rutgers, and I think there's a lot of potential in this team. I'm gonna go lean over with low confidence on Rutgers. I do think that there is some potential here. I think they can go 7-5 and go bowling.
The Big Ten Conference basically did Rutgers a huge solid here. They said, we're sorry that we threw you in the Big Ten East for all those years. And this is the Big Ten Conference's gift to Rutgers, was releasing them from the strain that was the Big Three, and they gifted them this schedule. I mean, honestly, I had a really hard time with this team, man,
It
because
is tough.
I have I have indicators from my process that I go through to look at and grade these teams and make these decisions. I have indicators going all over the place for this team. Let me get into it. So the schedule is a godsend. This
It
schedule
is.
is it,
It
but it's
is.
what gives this team so much variance, in my opinion, because I wrote down in my notes that if things go well for Rutgers, like if Rutgers has everything, things go their way, like you said, the offense takes a huge steps forward. Kaliak Manis maybe actually becomes decent, like we were expecting from him last year. This could be like a 9-win team, which is crazy. Like they could finish 9-3. I'm looking at the schedule. You can't say that's not crazy
I
if
mean,
things go well for
talk about all the
Rutgers.
winnables I went through on that schedule, man. I think it's
Exactly.
totally possible.
And I totally see it as a possibility, but I also see this possibility in the other direction where I think the under is strongly in play here. And here's why. I don't know if I can just bank on the offense taking a step forward. I do think that the QB switch, to me, it still seems like a wash. I think you have the running back offensive line improvement. That's for sure going to be helpful for the offense. But ultimately the quarterback play is going to make or break the offense. I don't know if I can just put my faith and put my pin in Kalik Monis and say you're going to be my guy that's going to carry me to this over and help you win all these games. Defense, I can't really say many bad things about this defense. It was pretty good last year. I could see them definitely jumping in the top 30, 35 this year. But is it going to be good enough? Because here's the thing. My model has Rutgers at 4.6 wins, which I was a
They do
little
not like
flabbergasted by.
Rutgers.
My model does not like Rutgers, and I can't figure out why because they do have a fair amount of returning production, and I figured the model was maybe a little bit put too much stock into just sheer raw returning production. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't get it. It does not like Rutgers.
I feel like
And
with that strong of an under from your model shoot, you got to lead under.
And unfortunately, that's what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be leaning under, but I also wrote in my notes if they go 9-3 or 8-4, like I won't be surprised because of the schedule. Like it's schedule driven. But here's my bottom line here. I was like trying to look at this and I'm like, okay, like what's given my model reason for this? I had to do some digging. I look at last year's schedule. Last year, Rutgers, of course, went 7-6, breakout season, and I liked them. I was a high man on Rutgers last year. Well, now I'm ready to douse the flames. I'm ready to put out that fire because I look at that at last year's season, and I'm looking at Rutgers' season. They opened the year against Northwestern. They won that game, sure. You beat Temple. They beat Virginia Tech early in the year. Remember, Rutgers started out 3-0, and I was running my victory lap already. They played Virginia Tech early in the year, and I look at this schedule and all these teams that Rutgers played. I think Rutgers really lucked out with when they played their teams last year because they played Virginia Tech early and beat them. Virginia Tech started really getting in their groove later in the season, and they got Virginia Tech early. They got Wagner. They lost to Wisconsin. They only beat Michigan State by 3 points at home. Michigan State was a skeleton roster last year, losing their head coach. So they kind of got lucky there. They beat Indiana last year late in the season when Indiana, their coach was basically gone. That was another skeleton quit alert team. So I feel like they kind of got a benefit of circumstances there. And then they got smoked by, well, they didn't get smoked by Ohio State. They were actually competitive with them. That was respectful. Iowa, they didn't score a single point against Iowa.
I mean, that's voodoo, man. The Iowa voodoo. They do that to a lot of people.
Now, I know they do it to a lot of people. They didn't score a single point against Iowa. They only scored 6 points. Penn State were non-competitive, and then they lost to Maryland at the end of the year. And they got their seventh win because they beat Miami in the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. So call me crazy, but I don't think the Miami Hurricanes, with the types of players that they recruit to go to that school, I'm just gonna say I don't think Miami was maybe the most motivated to show up for the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl against Rutgers. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say I don't think Miami played their best there in that game. So you get my point here. Sorry, Rutgers fans. Another point here too. I look at Rutgers and I'm like, okay, they had a good defense last year. They could be improving here and here, but then I look at the Big Ten, man. It's like almost every team looks like on paper that they're better than last year. And Rutgers, yes, very sound fundamental defensive team. Shiano's a great coach, but like there comes a certain point where you're like, okay, if every one of these teams is getting better, Rutgers is one of those teams where your talent level it hits a ceiling at a certain point. And when there's other teams that maybe didn't have their act together that you beat last year, those guys with that talent start realizing their potential, they're gonna jump you. Sorry, Rutgers. So I'm gonna have to go under here. And maybe this is what my model's telling me, but at the same time, I totally see a scenario where they go 8-4 and Kaliakmanis does become the Greek rifle and they win all these close games against these teams that are definitely beatable. So I don't know. I don't know what the hell's gonna happen here, but I'm gonna go under and I'm gonna go with low confidence.
And I
Actually,
will
no,
say,
I'm going
shoot,
with medium confidence. I'm going medium
medium.
confidence.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, okay.
Screw
I
it. I'm
mean, you
going
gotta
medium.
you gotta trust the model, right? The model's a whole two, like a 2.5 below. Like so,
Yeah.
I will say this. I will say this, Shoop. Part of my overplay is shout out to my dad. He's now a Rutgers alumni. So
Oh,
I mean, he finished degree there, got his MBA. So I
oh,
mean,
nice.
yeah, pops, if you're watching, shout out this over's for you. So.
Well, I'm sorry for just dumping all over your pop's grad school now. No.
Well,
Well,
let's move on, man. We got another half to do here.
yes, let's move on. All right. Next team is the UCLA Bruins. UCLA comes in with a win total of 5 wins. They have a little bit of an under on that juiced at -150. UCLA is an interesting case this year. Chip Kelly, of course, departed for Ohio State. New man in town, head coach Deshaun Foster, former NFL running back and former UCLA running backs coach, who was the running back coach there for 7 years. And Deshaun Foster, of course, this is his first year as a head coach, period. Head coach anywhere. So he made a huge jump and he came back to UCLA to take this job. And who can blame him? I mean, I think this is a dream job for him. And it's pretty cool to see a former player and an alum that's now the head coach at UCLA And this is a place that, I think maybe it hit a ceiling with Chip Kelly where it wasn't recruiting very well and needs to start using the NIL and get with the modern game. Deshaun Foster potentially could be the right man for the job in those areas. But as far as on the field coaching and being a CEO of a program, it's a big unknown. It's his first year as a head coach, period. So what's your say, Xan? Their win total is 5 wins even. This thing's got bet down a little bit. I don't think the market's very high on UCLA on the field for 2024, but what do you think?
Let's break it down. One thing I think is really interesting is we always heard in the NFL circles, Eric Bieniemy. Why is Eric Bieniemy not getting a head coach job? Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy every year. Like, and then every time there's like a head coach opening, oh, Eric Bieniemy is a candidate. Eric Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy. I feel like people were trying to speak it into existence, and then all of a sudden, this man is no longer an NFL offensive coordinator. He is now the offensive coordinator for the UCLA Bruins. I don't know if his inability to secure a head coaching job when his name was coming up so often is a product of how he's perceived or his work or what's going on behind the scenes, or if he's just generally being overlooked. And that's going to be something that's very interesting because that's something that we'll see in this transition to UCLA. So that's one thing that I'm really interested to watch, and one narrative that I'm definitely interested to look at here. This is going to test the coaching acumen of Eric Bieniemy, at least on the offensive end. I'm with you in terms of concern with Deshaun Foster. I do like it's a former alum. I do like it's a guy who's passionate about the program, but you've never been a coordinator. You've never been a head coach. It's going to be tough, man. Deshaun Foster was a very, very strange hire, in my opinion. I understand why, but I don't think it was the most logical. Anyways, let's jump into the offense, man. Ethan Garbers is probably going to be the starter. He's your most, tenured guy there. I mean, he's okay. He's a decent quarterback in his own right. He's had some good games. You return T.J. Harden, pretty solid running back there, averages over 5 yards a carry, 800 yards of production. Like that a lot. But then I look at this wide receiver room, and I'm looking there's some returning production, some decent guys. We've got Logan Loya, 600-yard guy, J. Michael Sturdivant, 600-yard guy, and then a Notre Dame transfer who, was a former four-star. So there is a possibility that this wide receiver group could be pretty decent. Then we look at the offensive line, and I gotta say, man, they've got a dude that grades decent on here, but I'm really concerned with their pass protection. Their tackles do not grade out well at all, not at all. And they didn't really bring in any significant protection for Ethan Garbers. I think that could be a real issue, especially when you're playing teams like Oregon and all these others, if it comes to it. I look at their schedule, Shoob. I see Oregon, I see LSU, I see Penn State. I see teams that can get to the quarterback, and that's going to be an issue. We look at the other side of the ball. This UCLA team lost a lot, Shoob. They got gutted in the portal and the NFL draft. They lost, and graduation. They lost so many effective dudes on that defensive line. They lost dudes in the middle of that defense. They lost a lot of dudes in that secondary. It's this secondary is fielded by mostly transfers, man. This secondary has 3 projected starters at a transfer position. They returned 2 corners at least in Devin Kirkwood and Jalen Davies, who both have some experience, but neither one. They grade out very, very average at best. It's interesting, man. The linebacking group might be decent. They brought in Joseph Vaughn from Yale, who grades out pretty well. He's going to be a depth guy, though, so I think that speaks to what they have at that position. They probably feel pretty confident at that level. But overall, they're taking a massive step down on the defensive line. They're taking a step down on the defensive backs. I don't know, Shoob. And then we have all these issues with the coaching. I wouldn't say issues, but we have all these question marks with the coaching.
Unknowns, yeah.
Exactly. And so, and when we look at it's not necessarily that UCLA is a bad team. They're just not what they were last year, and it's not like they were elite last year. In addition to that, their schedule's pretty tough, Shoob. They have a whole stretch here where they literally 3 weeks in a row go at LSU, play Oregon, then go at Penn State. That is a brutal stretch.
You think they regretted scheduling going to at Hawaii and at LSU in non-con, and then on top of that, you join the Big Ten,
and then you got to go at Penn State. You want to talk about traveling?
They're not even just going east; they're going west across the Pacific Ocean.
They're going everywhere, man. Yeah, I'm telling
Brutal.
you, man. Like UCLA is going to get jet lagged, bro. Like
They
no team is traveling more than UCLA. You go at Hawaii. You got to go 1,000 miles basically just to go play like a team that's like on your own coast or closest to your own coast.
I
And
don't know
then
why would you go schedule to fly across the Pacific Ocean to play a Mountain West team? That's what you're UCLA. What are you doing? Like
yeah, and then a bye week, and then you play Indiana at home, and we're higher on Indiana. I mean, Indiana's a team that could come punch you in the mouth, man. So I'm not going to say that's an absolute gimme. So look, you've got one. You start 1-1 or 2-0. Okay, cool. But then you go at LSU. You're probably going to lose that game. That's still a decent little traveling. That's 1,000 miles. Then you're going to come all the way back home and play Oregon. It's another 1,000-mile trip because you have to come back. And then you're going to go 2,000 miles to play Penn State, and you're probably going to lose. So
that's
you're going to
brutal.
lose 3 games in a row. Then you got to come 2,000 miles to come back home and play Minnesota. Then you got to go 2,000 miles to play Rutgers at Rutgers. Then you got to go 2,000 miles to come home. And then you get to sit for a little bit. Then you get to go 1,000 miles to play Nebraska. Then you you
Yeah,
see this here.
it's brutal. It's
Then you got to
brutal.
come 1,000 miles home to play Iowa. Then you get to go out Washington. That one's reasonable. Then you get to play UC. Okay, that's reasonable. Then you get to play Fresno. Okay. The last
I
part
mean,
of the season.
if you've
The last
anything
part of
left
the
in the
season.
tank by the time you play Fresno, like,
Exactly. But this stretch is what really kills me, Shoob. This stretch, going at Penn State, coming home, Minnesota. Then you got to go all the way across the dang country again right after that to go to Rutgers. Like
it's
that's
not
that's
easy.
crazy to me. That's crazy to me. And part of this is scheduling dynamics, Shoob, because I think UCLA does have like some people to make this a pretty like serviceable team. And Eric Bieniemy, I mean, he's been highly touted as being a good offensive coach, but shoot, the traveling dynamics do not work for this team at all. And then not to mention that stretch that LSU, Oregon, Penn State stretch where you're probably going to lose 3 in a row. And if you've already taken an L to Indiana, dude, they might be on full quit alert by midseason. And then you got to go play Minnesota and then at Rutgers, like right off the bat. I mean, shoot, I have a hard time seeing this team going bowling this year. If anything, I think they can maybe push at 5-7, but I'm going undershoot, and I'm going to go with medium confidence on this.
Yeah, I don't blame you one bit there. Yeah, the scheduling dynamics are just absolutely brutal. And like you mentioned, the bye week this year, with every team has 2 bye weeks built into their schedule. UCLA does too, but their first bye week is right after Hawaii and after week 1, so they get that bye week after Hawaii, which sure is nice. But then you already burn your bye week after one game, and you look at that schedule, and then that second bye week's there in October, great, but everyone else is getting 2 bye weeks in the middle back end of their schedule. UCLA only has one. So relative to what everyone else is getting, that's a huge disadvantage. And yeah, that they're going to be taking some punches, but you know what? Sean Foster, the one good thing that'll come out of the season is that he'll have his frequent flyer miles in order,
Oh my
that's for
god,
sure.
yeah.
So at least
He'll
you
he'll
got
have enough
that.
for a free ticket to China and back, and maybe 2 or 3 times. Like,
It'll be. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this travel miles ends up being like 2 trips around the globe or something by the end of the year. But
I'm curious. I know someone by the end of the year is going to tally this. Like, there's no way.
oh yeah, I think they already have. I think there's already
Oh, have
stuff
they?
out there that
Oh man,
tags that stuff.
I gotta see the travel miles for UCLA.
I'm pretty sure they're number one. I think they have to
Oh, they
be.
gotta be, but I want to see what the number is.
Well, as far as the team, so I'll say on the good side, I actually, in my notes at least, 61st last year in offense. I actually think Ethan Garbers, he finally he's a guy that's been around. He was there with Chip Kelly, transferred over from Cal a few years ago. He sat behind Dante Moore. Probably wasn't the greatest position to be in, knowing that you're probably better than the kid, but the kid's only playing because he was a 5-star and got paid NIL to be there, and he didn't end up being that good. You were clearly better than him, and now he finally gets his chance. I mean, listen, Dante Moore still has a lot of potential to unlock at Oregon. But as far as on the field results last year, Ethan Garbers is an upgrade over what they had last year. So I think it's actually a bump up at QB. And as far as Eric Bieniemy, it is very interesting, but I don't know. He was also named, I don't know if you knew this, he was also named the associate head coach. Now, I don't know if that really means much, but I think it was actually a good move by the Sean Foster. I think this is actually a great hire because you bring in a guy that has a ton of NFL experience, coordinating experience, some of the top NFL offenses at UCLA at the college level. I feel like that can only be a good thing, that experience. I can't see how that could be a bad thing. So I think hiring Bieniemy is actually a pretty good hire. So I actually like that. Will it make the offense into a top 20 offense? Definitely not. But I actually at least like that they got what they got at quarterback. I think it'll be an upgrade. Defense, listen, Danton Lynn just worked magic with this defense. He worked magic with it. Remember 2 years ago they had one of the worst defenses in the Big
They
Ten.
were, and then they were ninth in efficiency because of Danton Lynn.
Yeah. And then of course Lincoln Riley went and poached him. Yeah, the guy did wonders. This defense is gonna fall off a cliff. I'm sorry, that's just what's gonna be. So it doesn't really matter how much better the quarterback play is on offense. Here's the thing. I don't get it. How many wins do you think my model has? How many wins do you think my model has? Guess.
You said you don't get it, so it's actually making me think it's higher than I'm expecting.
I may have showed my hand there.
7?
6.8.
Wow.
I
I don't
I
think your model's accounting for this travel, man.
no.
Like, no
Nor the
way.
head coach. Nor the head coach. I I I can't do it. Sorry, model. I cannot do it. I'm going under. I'm going under. I think worst case scenario, if this thing ends up being like a train wreck, this could be like a 3-9 team. This could legitimately be a candidate for one of the worst teams in the Big Ten if things don't go well. Will they be the worst? Maybe not. But I see this as like a 3-4-5 win team. Sorry, guys. It's rough first year for Deshaun Foster. The scheduling, and the Big Ten and your own AD didn't do you any favors here. So I'm gonna go under, and I'm going at it with medium confidence. And the only reason I'm not going at it with high confidence is because how can I go at something with high confidence when my model is saying this is a massive overplay by like almost 2 wins? I don't get it. But yeah, sorry, model. I'm not doing it. But you know what? If UCLA wins 6 or 7 games somehow, then I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna I may just blindly follow the model forever. All right. Next team up is their counterparts across town, USC, the Trojans. USC comes into the Big Ten after an 8-5 season last year. Kind of a disappointing season for USC. Caleb Williams, the reigning Heisman winner, coming back. Defense did not live up to the billing last year. And Lincoln Riley, now heading into the Big Ten, big changes are being made. No more Caleb Williams. New defensive coordinator came in, which was a phenomenal hire. But the thing is, how long is it going to take? And now that you're in the Big Ten, who plays a very drastic, different style of football than what you're used to playing, what's that transition going to be like? It's basically the big key word here for USC this year's transition. They probably are the most fascinating team to watch, to as I would argue, and of all the realignment teams this year, in terms of the transition, in terms of contrast of style and trying to completely change what you do in your scheme and everything. USC, I think, is the most fascinating team to watch. And their win total is 7.5 wins, a little slight juice to the over at -125, which is pretty interesting. What's your say, Zan?
I'm with you. This is a very interesting team, and I kind of tilted my hat about this earlier in the pod that I'm much higher on this defense, and part of that's because they brought in Danton Lynn, and we know the big issue for USC has never been offense. They've always been one of the most efficient offenses since Lincoln Riley landed over there and spurned the Sooners. Had to add that part in there. But then defensive coordinator Danton Lynn comes in from UCLA. We mentioned this. He had the ninth most efficient defense over there with the Bruins. And you mentioned before when we were talking about UCLA in the past segment that UCLA had a horrible defense. I think they were like sub 70 or sub 60 in efficiency. And then all of a sudden they're ninth with Danton Lynn on board. So I really like that ad. I really think it makes USC more formidable, and all they need really is to buck up on that part of the ball. The bad news is you lost Caleb Williams on offense, who's like may possibly a generational talent, but at the same time, you have really good quarterback play, I think, at that spot still. Moss Miller, in limited sample size, was pretty solid. You also brought in Jaden Mayava from UNLV, who was really good over there. So even if one goes down, you got the other. I really like what they have at quarterback. Then you may have lost Marshawn Lloyd to the NFL, but you got Woody Marks coming in from Miss State, and then we're hoping that Quentin Joyner can step up a little bit. But overall, there's going to be some talent on the offense. Then you return Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, and then you have some other guys who are probably going to have to step up on this team. But they've got no shortage of dudes who are highly touted coming out of high school. So we'll see what comes out of this USC offense. I do think this offense isn't going to be what it was last year, but I do think this is still going to be a dang good offense. I mean, they were 7th in efficiency last year. I still would, I mean, maybe 25th in efficiency. It's still pretty dang good. I could totally see them falling to maybe 20th or 25th. That's still competitive. What we really want to look at and what we really want to highlight is the defense, Shoob. I mean, 80th in defense efficiency last year. That's pretty normal for USC. 80th or sub 100, just bad, man. So if Danton Lynn can get them into the top 40, we've got a team here. Even if their offense takes a step back, we've got a competitive team here. Now, are we talking Big Ten championship competitive? I don't think so. But we're looking at team heading in the right direction competitive. And that's what we need now. Because if you're a USC fan, you've probably been thinking these past few years, like, man, if we just had a defense, we could accomplish so much. Congrats. I think Danton Lynn might be your guy to get you to that level. We look at the defense. I mean, you got Barry Alexander in the middle. We'll see if he's just a big name or if he's a great player. He's had his moments. He's had his shortcomings. We'll see if he continues to grow from that. They also added Nate Clifton from Vandy, but overall their D-line is probably going to be, I think, actually a pretty average one. Given what USC is, I would expect a little more from that D-line, but very average, if I had to say so myself. I do like one of the linebacker ads in Easton Mascarenas Arnold from Oregon State. He grades out pretty well. He's a highly graded transfer. You return Eric Gentry, but overall, I mean, there's still a little bit of weakness in that group. I mean, Mason Cobb is still listed as one of their starters at the linebacking position, and he graded horribly last year in terms of run defense, pass rush, like every single stat he graded terrible, like way below average, and he's still considered a starter there. So that kind of tells me that they're tipping their hat a little bit at that level. And who knows, maybe Danton Lynn sees something in Mason Cobb. Maybe he sees something, because I mean, Mason Cobb, let's not forget, was a great player at Oklahoma State before he transferred to USC. So maybe Danton Lynn can bring that life back into this linebacking core and and spice it up a little bit. Then I do like that they brought in John Murphy from UCLA, who grades out pretty well in pass coverage. You've got Jacob Covington, and then you've got other depth pieces. You may have lost Kalen Bullock in the secondary, but they added 2 really good safeties, and Achille Arnold from Oregon State. Poor Oregon State, man, lost all their best players. And Kamari Ramsey, also from UCLA. So, I mean, I really like what they have in this secondary. I think this can actually be a pretty dang good secondary in the league under Danton Lynn. My concern is really just kind of what they're going to do with that front 7. So if we see some improvement with that front 7, though, I think this can be a significant improvement, Shoob. I think this could be a top 40 defense if Danton Lynn's able to get something out of this front 7. I think that back 4 to 5 is going to be very strong, depending on what they're going to run with that. I like USC to be about 25th offense and hopefully maybe like 40th in defense. If we get that, we got a team that's competing for this over here, Shoob. Now let's jump into schedule, because schedule is important. LSU in Vegas. Interesting. They play in Vegas. So, I mean, it's like almost a home game for USC, but I feel like LSU is going to travel better than the USC fans, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Probably more LSU fans. They travel really well.
They do, and they have a much larger fan base than USC. I mean, this is the Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush days where like everyone and their mama was a USC fan. But anyways, that's going to be a tough game for USC, but it's going to be a good litmus test to show where they're at right now, going into this year. That one, I think I would favor LSU in that game. LSU's got a good team, but LSU still has lost a significant amount of production from last year. Let us not forget the wide receivers and quarterback that won the Heisman that LSU lost. So LSU's replacing some production there, but still a very well-coached team. They got a lot of talent. So I'm still going to lean LSU despite all that in that game, but I think it'll be a good one. Then you get Utah State. I think you win that. You go bye week, then you go at Michigan. That's going to be a tough one, man, because Michigan's known for their defense. I don't know if your offense taking a little bit of a step back. this one could turn to a rock fight, honestly. And so that one being at the big house, I don't know that you come away with the win against Michigan. I'm leaning a loss on that. Then you play Wisconsin. You're at home at least. Wisco's got to come all the way to you. We'll see how that goes. That one I have more as like a toss up. Then we go at Minnesota. Certainly not a definitive game that you're going to win. Especially, we'll see what the climate looks like. Luckily, that's kind of mid year. I don't think it's going to be too cold just yet for the USC boys, but we'll see. I got that toss up, but I kind of lean USC on that. Then they get Penn State at home. I think Penn State wins that. They go at Maryland. They should win that game. You get Rutgers at home. I think you can win that game. You get Washington. You have to go at Washington. I think you can win that game. Then you get a bye week to prepare for Nebraska. I think that's a winnable game because you have the bye week to prepare for Nebraska and you're at home. Then you go play at UCLA, which I'm not very high on them. I think that's very winnable. And then you got Notre Dame, which I think is probably a loss. So let's look at this all together. Utah State, possibly Minnesota, Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA. That's about 7 right there. But then you've got to steal another one somewhere along the ways here. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, which game are you going to steal for me? Are you going to steal Michigan? Probably not. Are you going to steal LSU? If you're going to steal LSU, it'd be an early season for sure. It'd definitely be a week 1 type of game while LSU is still trying to get all their horses on the track, you know? So I'm going to do this and I'm going to say that very, very poor confidence. And this is going to be more of a lean to Lincoln Riley always have elite offenses and Danton Lynn absolutely transforming what was a terrible defense into a very good defense. And because of this, I'm actually going to lean to the over, but with very, very low confidence.
Very low confidence. So that's, I think, the biggest question with this team, and probably is going to be the biggest difference maker. I think that what's going to make or break USC's season and whether they hit this total or not is going to be how fast does Danton Lynn fix the defense? How
Yep.
quickly does it happen? And I mean, that's the bottom line with the defense. I think, you pointed it out. There's still guys like Mason Cobb on this defense. There's still definitely things you can poke at with this defense and say, it's definitely not UCLA's defense that they had last year. That's definitely not for sure. I think there's a ways to go here. I
Mhm.
don't know how fast Danton Lynn fixes this defense. Personally, I'm not going to bank on it. Maybe in year 2 is where you really start seeing some big strides taken, but I'm not holding my breath personally. And then as far as the offense, I think Miller Moss, getting a lot of hype for that Holiday Bowl performance against Louisville, absolutely just lit it up for sure. But you know, I, this is the thing with bowl games is how
It's
much
hard to
stock
judge.
how much stock can you put in the bowl games? That was a Louisville team that had a chance to play for the ACC championship against Florida State without Jordan Travis. Lost that game. They also lost to Kentucky at the end of the year. I mean, that was a Louisville team that was like 10-1 going into the last week of the regular season. Remember, they were top 10, and then they kind of fell apart at the end. And I, all I'm going to say is I don't know how motivated Louisville was to be on their A game in that
That's
bowl
kind of
game.
become I'd say like here in the last 5 6 years that's been a very big theme with bowl games in general. It's not what they used to be.
Exactly. So when we see these great performances from these players, and we're basically using what the bowl game as the main reason for why we're hyping up these players going in the next year. It's like, well, you can't say the bowl games don't matter anymore, but then if your favorite player or a player on your team does it and what goes off, you can't put as much stock into that. I'm sorry, that's not how it works. And with Miller Moss, I hate to do it, but I think that's what I have to do here. I mean, his other games that he did play, the only other games where Miller Moss got playing time outside of the Holiday Bowl, San Jose State, Nevada, and Stanford. That doesn't tell you a whole lot. It's not going to
Yeah.
tell you a whole lot. So listen, it's Lincoln Riley. He's going to have Miller Moss put up points. But like I feel like this is one thing. I think this is where we have to do a rain check here. Shake out the towel, do a rain check. You're losing Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick
Yeah.
and the rating
And
Heisman winner.
you know what? And I will say, man, like Caleb Williams made up for a lot of sins on that offense. Like a
Yes.
lot of indiscretions. Yeah, man. Like without Caleb Williams, that offense probably would have been actually quite bad. Like there were so many plays where that offensive line fell apart, and Caleb Williams just turned it into an absolute huge play. So I mean,
Yes, we've been preaching that for the last 2 years on this podcast. If you took Caleb Williams off of USC the last 2 years and just put in an
mhm,
average quarterback, that's like a 6-16. The, last
mhm,
year, if you will make Caleb Williams and you replace him with just some average Joe, that team might not even make a bowl game. I mean, the defense is horrible.
mhm.
Like you're losing Caleb Williams using the number one draft pick. I don't care one game in a bowl for Miller Moss. It's not Caleb Williams, guys. You're losing the number one overall pick and the
Yeah,
Heisman winner.
it's not.
It's a downgraded quarterback. Let's just call it like it is. It is a downgraded quarterback. Lincoln Riley will get the most out of Miller Moss, but man, Caleb Williams masked so many obvious holes the last 2 years on USC, and we have been preaching that. So that's the end of my rant here. But I will say, what will help Miller Moss is if that trio of true sophomores, Zachariah Branch, Makai Lemon, Deuce Robinson, if those guys pop, then that'll alleviate a lot of your pains. But yeah, the offensive line I think is a huge red flag. Apparently, Lincoln Riley said he thinks it's his most talented offensive line he's had in a few years. I'm like,
I feel like every coach is saying that
yeah,
this offseason.
I
I feel like every time that we do this, like in one of the six teams, we always have a coach saying, "This is my best offensive line I've had."
yeah, I'm sorry, Lincoln. I gotta see it to believe it. There, that's. But anyways, their center is good. Jonah Monheim at center for sure, NFL prospect. But the guys around him, I don't know about that. And listen, the model for you, the model does not like USC. The model has USC at 5.3 wins.
Ooh,
Yikes!
that's an underplay, man.
Yikes! Yeah, I know. Listen, man, I
And I
don't
will
want to do
say
it to him again.
the more and more we talk about Caleb Williams, the more and more it makes me regret going over. But hey, we don't. There's no takebacks here, baby. I'm sticking over. But I will say that's why I said very very low confidence.
You did preface that, yes, but I'm not totally just gonna say this team won't win 8 games, but I think this is one of those situations where like there's so much irrational hype around Miller Moss that I'm just like, guys, you're losing Caleb Williams. Like it's not gonna be the same.
Yeah.
Nowhere near the same as what you've been getting the last 2 years. So yeah, 5.3 wins. Listen, I think the model's being a little bit harsh for sure on USC, but you went over the schedule already. That schedule is brutal. If you lose to LSU, Michigan, maybe you drop one to Wisconsin or Minnesota out of the gate, and then you got to go Penn State. I mean, I look at this schedule. Let me ask you this. If you look at USC's schedule outside of Utah State, I see every single one of these games on this schedule as a losable game.
Yeah.
If
Outside of Utah State, yeah, I would say, yeah, they're all losable. I would favor them in some of these games, but they're all losable in the right circumstances, except for Utah State.
exactly, I cannot in good faith go over here. I'm gonna go under, and I'm gonna go under with high confidence. I'm pretty confident in this one, and this just continues my very on brand of me fading Lincoln Riley and USC. Third year in a row now that I'm doing this, but it's cash. It's it's
Well,
it's won me some money 2 years in a row now.
what was your thing? I'm gonna die on this hill until my corpse is disintegrated into the ground.
That was 2022 when USC was one of the biggest frauds in recent college football memory, and then they got smoked by Utah in the Pac-12 championship when people thought they were a playoff contender. And you know what? USC should be glad that they got smoked by Utah in the Pac-12 championship, because if that didn't happen, they would have had to face Georgia, that 2022 Georgia team, in
And
the
they would have really got
semifinals, and
smoked.
that would have you thought TCU versus Georgia was bad, that would have been like a 60-7 beatdown, and the only reason it would have been worse is because Georgia would have had another game to play. Unlike TCU was the natty, at least Georgia would have had another game they'd have to get ready for, so they would have it wouldn't have been by 60, but it would have been by like 50. That's what we got saved by Utah, thankfully. Sorry, USC fans, but I've been a hater. I'm going to continue to hate. But listen, man, one last point about this schedule. Worst possible case for USC. Like let's say the offense is a dud. The defense doesn't even improve that much. Like worst
Oh,
possible
they're not
scenario.
going bowling.
Well, I think, listen, I think that it is not out of the realm of possibility if things just go extremely poorly for USC this year that they go like 3-9.
It's possible. Yeah.
It's possible. It's possible. I'm a huge hater right now. I'm a
Hey,
Trojan
hey,
hater.
hey! I regret my overplay. I wish I could go under with one, but I'm gonna stay over. We're not. We're no undoozies.
Yeah, I bet my personal money on this one already. This is one of my favorites, but very on brand for me. But yeah, if USC ends the year like 4-8, I won't be the most surprised person in the world. I'll just say that. But anyways, all right, moving on here. Last team on this list, the Washington Huskies. Boy, Washington, what a ride last year, man. Honestly, Washington became uh I guess for all of us, you, me, and Gonzo, Washington sort of became our unofficial new favorite team last year
Our
that we get to
darlings.
ride. They were. I mean, we were on them in the preseason last year. We were on them. I had them winning the Pac-12. We were on them to be an elite team, and they cashed it in for us, and they did even better than we even thought by a mile. And they played for a national championship. I don't know if we saw that one coming. I had them in the playoff last year. I didn't think they would. I didn't think they were capable of playing for a national championship, let alone having a pretty good chance to win it against Michigan, which I feel like they did. I feel like they were pretty. They matched up pretty well against Michigan, but Michigan was just a little bit better of a team. I mean, that close to a national championship with Kalen DeBoer, and then one of, I think, probably, if you're a Washington fan, probably one of the darkest 48 hours in your school's history was when Kalen DeBoer left. And after the national championship game, and the wheels fell off the bus, and there's a mass exodus. You hired Jed Fish, which was a great hire. Jed Fish is a phenomenal coach, but I mean, this is a completely new team. Like, this isn't even like you can't even when you do this, when you do these analyses of this team, you normally at least have a bunch of players on the roster from the prior year to compare the new team to. Well, with Washington, we don't really have much to compare them to because pretty much this entire starting roster is new. So this is like an entirely new team, entirely new coaching staff, entirely new everything. But that being said, Jed Fish is a great coach, and Washington's got a win total of 6.5 wins, even money on either side. So even the sports books are throwing their hands up, like, listen, like, go for it, over under. We're not going to juice it. So, what's your take on Washington, man? 6.5 wins is the win total. Jed Fish, first season at Washington, did a phenomenal job turning around Arizona. What do you think the Huskies are in store for in 2024?
Well, I'll tell you right now, Shoob, that if I'm being honest with you, I have no freaking idea. But let's at least look at it. Because I mean, Jed Fish, I think, is a great hire, and they brought in Brendan Carroll, who comes from Arizona with that 12th most efficient offense in the league or in the NCAA, which is always nice to have. But we can't forget, you're coming off Michael Penix. You lost your tight end to the NFL. You lost all those. You lost three wide receivers to the NFL. I
They
mean,
lost 9 players to the NFL. They had 9 draftees.
yeah, I'm just talking about just general like stud quarterback and receivers. I was just talking quarterback and receivers. We haven't even gotten to the rest of the roster, but like, yeah, man. I mean, this team is a skeleton of what it used to be. That team was insane last year. Insane coaching, insane players, and so it is so hard to replicate that. But have we lost so much that we're going to drop from what they were to a 6.5, kind of win team or barely making a bowl game? It remains to be seen because I mean we still do have some decent coaches coming in here, but I will say one that kind of sticks out to me that I think is intriguing and kind of I don't know what to think of it is the defense coordinator hiring Steve Belichick. Is that name ring a bell, Shoob?
It does. It does. And in fact, I think
Son of old Bill Belichick.
son of old Bill, who's dating someone that could be his granddaughter's age, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I don't know what to think about that defense coordinator hire because he doesn't have that experience. Now I know he's worked with the New England Patriots as a defensive coach, but he's never been the coordinator. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that one works out. I feel like that might have been a play for pedigree for recruiting purposes. Be like, look, it's a Belichick guy. Like, come play for Belichick. But otherwise, I don't know why that hire was made. But I do like the offensive coach hire. I do like what they bring in at Will Rogers the quarterback position. I think given what was in the portal, I think they got a really good substitute for what you could possibly get. I mean, you did lose Michael Penix. You're not going to substitute him 1-for-1, but if you could at least substitute him in such a way that you bring in a guy who's been efficient in the past, then yeah, you've done a good job with that. I like that bring in. They also brought in Jonah Coleman from Arizona, who brings in basically 900 yards, 5 touchdowns on 6.8 yards per carry, by the way, and returned Cam Davis, who also is a situational guy, but 500 yards and 13 touchdowns. I mean, that's why you know he's a situational guy. 13 freaking touchdowns, 500 yards. And then the biggest thing, man, is the receiver room lost so much. Someone's going to have to step up. I do like one of the portal players they brought in, and Jeremiah Hunter from Cal, 700-yard guy, 7 touchdowns. But, I mean, otherwise, man, like, you're asking a lot. We're asking of a lot of these guys to step up, and not to say any of these guys are scrubs or any of these guys aren't good or anything like that. But they're not Rome Odunze. It's not Jalen Polk. It's not McMillan. I mean, we're certainly taking a massive step backwards here. And like regardless of what you're bringing in, the offensive line too lost some guys to the NFL and the portal. So we're seeing a kind of a skeleton offensive line here of what at least of what it used to be. Now, is this offensive line going to be what it was last year? Absolutely not. It's going to take a step backward. How far back remains to be seen. I think it might still be able to be an average unit, but it's all speculation at this point. And then I look over at the other side of the ball. I see the defensive line. They add Sebastian Valdez for Montana State, which is a decent add. And then the rest of the defensive line is a significant downgrade from what it was last year, just because of what you lost to graduation, the NFL, the portal, all these various entities. And so, once again, we're looking at a downgrade at the position. You look at the linebackers. I mean, you bring back Carson Bruder, which is really nice. He grades out pretty well. But then, I mean, the rest of the guys there are either lost for the same reasons. And you'll see a common thing here with Jed Fish bringing his Arizona guys. I mean, they bring in a cornerback, and what a name, Shoob. What a name. Ephesians Prysock. You can't.
Yeah, that's a great name.
That's like an automatic generated name. Like, I don't even know, man. Ephesians Prysock comes in, though. He grades out okay, and then you return Elijah Jackson. So, I mean, you got 2, like, experienced corners there. And then you return Cameron, Fabakulainen, who grades out pretty decently, and then you add Cameron Broussard from Sac State, who that one I'm not very high on. So I mean, ultimately, we're still taking a pretty big drop at every level on defense. Not to mention, we've got a defensive coordinator who I'm not even sure knows how to coordinate a defense. So it really does remain to be seen. I know Coach Bill Belichick for the New England Patriots is a defensive-minded coach, so maybe he's taught his son a few things, and I think that's what they're banking on here. But it's just so much of a wild card, man. I like Jed Fish. I think he's a good coach. I think he can put together more with less. But it's not like he's got Noah Fafita here. It's not like he's got the boys he had. He brought some of his boys from Arizona, but it's not like he had the other. He didn't bring his best dudes from Arizona, not or at least the crown jewels. And so I got to say, man, it leaves a lot to be desired. And that's why I have no freaking idea, Shoob. That's why I fully admit I have no freaking idea what to expect with this team. The defensive coordinator thing really throws me for a loop. All the different changes on the entire roster that we're going from this to this, but we're going from this to this, but are we at this or are we at this? That's kind of where it remains to be seen here. And this is why this isn't a bet I would not touch with a pole at all. I would not touch this with a 10-foot pole. And let's just dive into it, man. Weber State, Eastern Michigan, I fully expect you to win those games and start 2-0. Good start to the Jed Fish era. But then you have to play Washington State. And, I mean, Washington State probably wants to beat you. Washington is probably quite motivated to beat you because they're probably pretty pissed off that you left them over there
last year. Remember?
Yeah, exactly. And Washington State, granted, I mean, they don't have like Cam Ward or anything, but like Washington State is going to be quite motivated to beat you, and that's not going to be a gimme. That one's going to be a toss-up this year, considering this roster is not what it was last year. Then you've got Northwestern, and we know with Northwestern that one's always a little weird because Northwestern is one of those teams that can lose to anyone but also beat anyone. They're a very strange team, and you can never underestimate Northwestern. Then you go at Rutgers. I mean, 2,000-mile flight to go play at Rutgers. We mentioned Rutgers might be a little bit sneaky. I think with the scheduling dynamics here, having to go 2,000 miles, it certainly doesn't play to your advantage, even if you might be the better team. So, I mean, that one I can't definitively give you just because of the scheduling dynamics and, well, I'll say the traveling dynamics, not the scheduling dynamics. And then You got to play Michigan after that, which is probably going to be a loss, man. Then you've got to play at Iowa, the team that holds everyone like scoreless and like scores 2 touchdowns on defense. This is a perfect opportunity for Iowa to score 2 defensive touchdowns and beat Washington by a score of 14-3. Um, yes, their offense scores 0 points, Iowa. Just kidding. But anyway, then you go at Indiana off the bye week. Look, I think that's a winnable one, but it is at Indiana. And so, like one thing that you mentioned, Shoob, and I agree with you on this, is your kind of toss up games. You want those at home, and when you got like a toss up like that, especially coming off your bye week, going at Indiana. I mean, I still lean Washington in that game, but I mean, Indiana, you and I both are much higher on them than years past because the coaching staff and what they brought in. So that is not that's not a gimme. Then you got USC, not a gimme. Then you go at Penn State, another 2,000-mile trip, probably gonna lose. You get UCLA, I think you could probably win that. Then you get a bye week to go at Oregon. God, shoot, this is rough, man. This is rough. You could easily start 4-0, maybe even 5-0, but then after that, you're really chasing wins here. And then even if you start 5-0, Indiana could be tricky. You might beat Indiana and get 6. But then when's your next opportunity to realistically win a game? Maybe USC, maybe UCLA. But outside of that, there's maybe 8 winnables, I'd say, on this schedule, given what Washington has right now. And I do think Jed Fish is a great coach, but they need more time to build with Jed Fish there. And so I'm going to go lean to the under. I think Washington goes 6-6. I think 6-6 is more likely to 7-5. And I'm going to go with low confidence, though, because I truly have no freaking idea with this team.
I echo pretty much every sentiment. So, yeah, I'm kind of glad in a way that Washington was the last team that we were covering here. It just happened to be the way that we did it in alphabetical order. And because I'm looking at this team and I'm like, there's not a whole lot to compare it to. And you know what? If I look back at the rest of my plays and I'm like, I have a bunch of unders in the Big Ten or a bunch of overs, I can just use Washington as my if I'm lacking in one area, I'll just use them as my coin toss going the other direction to fill as a filler. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like that's kind of what I did here because I agree. I wouldn't touch this line with a 10-foot pole. And if I don't know if anybody has like, and I've been checking the lines, as we build out these templates and we look at these teams like out in advance. So I've been just kind of had a rough idea of what these lines have looked like throughout the summer, and I'm pretty sure this one like hasn't even moved. But like I see why, because if you're a better like who 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 in their right mind has any ounce of confidence to confidently say this team is going to be really good or really bad. And if I'm gonna be honest, I'm actually kind of impressed that the sports books, I feel like, pegged this line pretty well, I would say, actually.
The sports books are great at doing this, man. There's a reason the sports books have all that money.
Yeah, but I feel like this is hard to it's something that if they didn't peg it right, it could have been hammered. I think they could have been exploited pretty hard, but I don't think they really are. And the line hasn't moved. I feel like that's evidence of that. And yeah, I listen, you look at every positional unit and you're like, well, this is a rebuild. This is a downgrade from last year. Well, yeah, of course it is, but it's not like they're filling in. It's not like they're filling in these transfers that they're bringing in that Jed Fish is. It's not like these guys are complete scrubs. Like they're still good players from other schools. Um, I yeah, I don't have any idea. My model, I don't know how much stock I can put into it. That's 7.1. It's actually a little bit higher on Washington, but my model was drunk for this batch of teams today. So the model is 7.1 wins. Listen, you like the coaching staff for sure. I think that's definitely something that you can give as a feather in their cap for this team. I think one thing that I will say about the schedule is that I think it actually could be a good thing, if not a saving grace, at the beginning of their schedule's light. Because with this
True.
team, a completely new team, this might be one of those teams that is going to benefit from playing the cupcakes early on. And once they start getting more cohesion and getting used to each other, start meshing as the season goes on, yeah, the season's going to get tougher, but at least you had those easier games up front. I actually think the schedule beginning of the year light might actually be a saving grace that could help this team still have a decent season this year. And I'm gonna actually lean over here, but I'm gonna do it with low confidence. I say, yeah, they can get 7-5, but the primary reasons were, hey, still think they're better than Northwestern, still think they're better than Washington State. At Rutgers, yeah, it's tough. That's still winnable. at Indiana, that's tough, still winnable. I'm not as high as USC. That's at home. I'm not as high as UCLA. Probably should win that game at home. That's 8 or 9 games right there that I think you could or should win. I'm going to lean over, but I'm not confident, and I would not touch this with a 10-foot pole, to quote you. So there you go. All right, man.
Shoob, you really feeling confident in this slate of teams? I'm looking over here, a lot of twos, a lot of threes. I like it though. I like it.
Yeah, and I kind of figured that would be the case, but I also think there are edges to exploit here with these teams because they're new to the league and there's a lot of turnover. And I think these are the types of teams where there is betting opportunity to exploit. And I already bet personal money on USC under 7.5. um,
I think that's a solid bet.
yeah, but you know, I don't feel confident about my Rutgers one, and I do feel pretty confident about UCLA.
I feel pretty good about UCLA too. I don't think they're going to be very good this year, especially with their
Yeah.
scheduling dynamic. Holy crap, man! Like their travel is brutal.
Yeah, this is I feel like I had the most fun, but also the some of the hardest time making some of these decisions, but also the easiest time making some of these decisions. Like there was not a whole lot of teeter-tottering here besides Washington. I had strong conviction for a lot of my assessment of these teams, I feel like. But the model didn't help because the model was like doing the exact opposite of what I was assessing.
You know,
So
it's kind of fun though because then it throws you into like the whole
yeah,
because like,
exactly.
you being the analytical guy that you are, just being like, no, my brain says this, but the model says this.
Yeah, these teams turn my brain, or some of these teams turn my brain into mush. But yeah, I'm very interested to see at the end of the year what our records end up looking like for this batch of teams.
It's you're either going to go super positive or super negative because I will notice you're more aggressive than I am with these points. So you're either going to go very positive or very negative.
Yeah, I can't wait to tally this up at the end of the year with especially with our confidence point system. All right, man, that'll conclude the Big Ten Conference. We did it, and we are officially halfway through. We
All
we
right,
got a
man.
lot to do in a short amount of time, but we are halfway through with the Big Ten, and
Big
next
12
up is the
next.
Big 12. So I know we're going deep here, but really quick, now that we've concluded the Big Ten, very quickly, who is your Big Ten championship game, and who do you have winning the conference?
Oregon versus Ohio State and coin flip, man. Given health, assuming fully healthy teams going into that game, screw it, man. I'm gonna say Ryan Day can't win the big ones. Oregon, man, give me Oregon. Quack
Oh,
quack.
all right. I like it.
I think Dan Lanning is a better coach than Ryan Day. Even though Ryan Day's got the better Jimmys and Joes, Dan Lanning still got some pretty good Jimmys and Joes. But I also think he's got the X's and O's too. Despite actually, it doesn't matter. Ryan Day doesn't have the X's and O's. I take that back because he's got an all-star backing of coordinators. Man, we've talked about that, but man, that actually makes it really tough, man, because
Yeah,
that makes it so tough. But I'm gonna go with Oregon and Ohio State. I recoup a little bit on my Oregon pick, but Oregon, Ohio State for sure are my teams.
I would agree. I'm gonna go Oregon, Ohio State. I think if you were to tell me I have to throw a third team in there, that's not one of those two, I would honestly probably go with Penn State.
Yeah, I agree. Penn
I think
State.
Michigan is in that tier for sure, but they're at the
I think Penn
bottom of
State's a
that
little
big
bit better
four.
this year. Yeah,
Yeah,
Michigan's lost
I
a
would
little
agree.
bit.
I would say Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and then there's a pretty big drop off. And then I don't know what the hell you want to do with the rest of the league, but yeah, USC is definitely not in that tier. They're not even
No,
close.
they're not.
They think
They're
we've
not.
established that here. But
Yeah,
yeah, I'm gonna say Oregon, Ohio State, but I'm gonna go with conviction here. I'm gonna say Ohio State over Oregon in a rematch of the regular
yeah.
season. I like
I was
Ohio
just
State
thinking.
a
I was
lot.
thinking about the coordinators, and that's the only reason. Like I was kind of diving back on my Oregon because, like, yes, I do like Dan Lanning more than I like Ryan Day, but I love Ryan Day's coordinators. Man, his coordinators are like the absolute best in all college football money can buy.
Agreed. Yeah, if it'll be very interesting, and Ohio State will have two shots at Oregon potentially, and they could potentially have two shots at Michigan, and they do play Penn State, right? Yeah, they do. So Ohio State's gonna have two bites of the apple at Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan potentially. So assuming Ohio State makes the Big Ten championship game, it will be in a rematch against either one of those teams that are very likely to be there. So yeah, you can't really say there are any excuses here for the Buckeyes, but I'm gonna pick them to win the Big Ten, and I'm gonna pick them as my co-favorite with Georgia to win the national championship. Oregon's gonna be right there. All right, guys, that'll do it for the Big Ten Conference. I'm starting to lose my voice. Spoken a lot the last 2 days, and I got arrested because we got a lot of Big 12 to talk this weekend. And that's going to be fun because the Big 12, Big 12's our bread and butter here on this podcast. And my voice is tired, but this weekend I think my thumbs are going to be tired from flipping coins all day
Same.
when we do the Big 12.
Got to start saving them up.
That's right. All right, man. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, and we will see you for the Big 12. Peace.
Saturday scholars on the mic, breaking it down so right. Their analysis hits the target, prediction accuracy so razor tight. Bank account on the rise with each winning call. Not here for hot takes, just the facts, that's all. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany bars, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday scholars, anthem standing tall and tall. Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with their knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back. The Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back. Oh, oh. Getting out, shooting snacks and zany balls, a treat for each week. College football fans rejoice, find what you seek. Hidden gem in the podcast world, they know all. Saturday scholars, anthem standing tall and tall. Saturday scholars, the kings of the game, making waves with the knowledge, bringing the fame. Tune in each week, we stay on track. The Saturday scholars, we got your back.